Okay, so we are going to start finishing off our spot illustration in this demo. But it's worthy to take some time to kind of revisit what digital coloring is all about. And the first thing that makes digital coloring distinct from digital painting is that it happens underneath real or implied outlines. So sometimes we can confuse digital coloring with painting. But digital painting is more like you have a canvas, you just start making strokes. You kind of sketch it out, you build on top of that. That's what we'll be doing a little later on. But digital coloring is much more straightforward. It's thinking, okay, these are my outlines, and then how can I support them with coloring behind? And the first step is always the flat color step. And flat color is like filling in your shapes with panes of single colored glass. And that's always the first step because you need that as a base to build up on. Whether your background is white or whether your background is gray or whether your background is black, you need to have those flat colors to show the local color of the object you're illustrating. So for instance, these Ritz crackers without that flat color could be anything. They could be pillows. They could be, I don't know, lots of different things. But the flat color really helps to identify them and hopefully kind of strengthen their presence. But flat color alone doesn't always do the job. It doesn't do a good job of showing texture differences. Everything here looks smooth and flat. It doesn't make the crackers look crumbly. It doesn't make the bear fur look furry. So often we can add to that a duotone coloring, which splits that one local color into two distinct tones, a light version and a dark version. And notice that neither of them is the same as the local color. So the highlights are brighter than the local color, and the shadows should be darker than the local color. Now you have two types of this duotone approach, two basic types, and they're often combined now in modern illustration. But the first is what's called cut edge or hard edge duotone, or in animation it's called cell shading. And you'll see this in some video games and some cartoons, where each division of coloring shape is a clean divide. Don't mean to be zeroing in on his crotch, it's just the middle of the image. But around the muscles you can see that each shape is clearly defined, not just by the outlines, but by the shadow shapes as well. And that works really well for his chiseled arms, but it makes his face maybe a little less clear and a little splotchy looking. So there's a second type of duotone coloring, and that's to soften the transition. So soft edge duotone still has the lights and darks, but it gradates between them. So this makes his belly feel a lot softer, right? And soft edge allows me to do the soft textures of the bear fur. And then with duotone, even though I have crisp, hard edge duotone coloring in the Ritz crackers, I can use soft edge just to add some white highlights to them. Because white and black aren't colors, and those can be added in kind of as a slight special effect. Like I'm adding white to the red of the insignia just to make it look more reflective with my soft edge coloring. And that's how we get to this point. Now to do any further changes to it, I would have to go into more kind of special effect coloring, which might not be appropriate for this job. So let me just do a quick rundown of it. A little primer on your options when you're choosing digital coloring for yourself. So I'm going to open a new file, like we did when we were learning Illustrator. I'm just going to create a little playground where I can show off some stuff. So a digital coloring primer. I want it to be nice and big. So about 8 inches wide by maybe 16 inches tall. So we're going to go through a lot of different options. All right. So what's the first thing I need? Well, I want to keep my background blank white, and I want to create a new layer on top where I'm going to do my digital inking, my line work. And I'm going to make it solid black. I'm using a hard-edged brush That's scale sensitive. So as I push harder, it can be a thicker or thinner line. And I'm just going to draw a lemon. Oh, I need the opacity to be 100%. I want the size to be a little bit smaller. Okay, good. And I'm just going to draw a lemon. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Because digital coloring always starts with clean line work. Well, let me start even before this. So before I would draw the lemon, I would sketch it. If I'm doing this all digitally, I might use kind of a blue line, and I might say, okay, my lemon should be kind of like this. And a sketchy line repeats a lot of shapes. You're redrawing over yourself a lot. To find the right line, because it's easier for the human eye to find the right line if it has lots of options to choose from. This is what I call a sketchy line, right? To kind of find your way. I often do that in a sketchbook, but plenty of artists like to do it digitally, especially with a tablet. Okay, next, we take that sketchy line and we'll ink over the top of it. If we're just doing some quick illustration with a brush that is 100% opaque. And we'll try to be as smooth as we can, but often we mess it up, right? And the problem with just using a black brush like this is it's pixel based. So if I have to erase it or play with it in different ways, it's not going to be perfectly clean. So I like to create my line work with a vector. And if I'm doing that within Photoshop, which is not my favorite, I use the freeform pen tool, which helps me to smooth it out and to correct any wrong curves especially. I keep it contained. So there are my vector shapes, you can see them, or my vector strokes and all the anchors. And then I can right click on it and turn it into a stroke path using a certain brush size, simulating the pressure to go thick to thin. And if I want it that way, that's great. I can get a nice clean vector line that will scale infinitely if I choose a different resolution. Okay, now that I have a clean vector line, like so, and I can use the vector tools to modify it, just like I can in Illustrator, to kind of move it together, help everything work. And output a new vector line. Like so. Then I have a clean line work that I can color behind. So I call this line work. I usually lock it so it can't get messed up. And then I start coloring behind it. So this is what I call the vector line work. Simple enough. That is a very chunky brush. And this is where most of you are now. You have your vector line work and we're beginning coloring. I don't know why I add an extra E. All right. So here's the goal now. Let's take that vector line work. And let's figure out how to get color variations that we're happy with. So the easiest way is to do what's called flat color. Right? Flat color, I can simply use the line work layer and select with the magic wand with contiguous turned on, usually at a standard tolerance of 32, all the space within the shape. And then I'll usually put the coloring behind the line work. And I'll pick something that's a really bold local color. So if this was a Sunday comic that had no shading at all, that's the color that the lemon is, right? Without any sort of lighting condition. And if I wanted extra texture on the lemon, I would do it with inking. It would be done with line work, not with the flat color. So this is what's called flat local color. But that's just a start. On top of the flat local color, once you know what that is, and that can take long enough depending on all the different options we have. Let's see. We can add different light sources. So let me make a copy of that. And now what can we do with this flat local color? Oh, I want that line work as well. Let's see. All this extra stuff I'm doing is just so I can put it all onto one screen for you. So you can see the progression without having to look at lots of different layers. Okay, so now on top of this flat local color, I might add duotone. So I might split this individual local color into two different tones. And I can do that through modifying the local color, first to a highlight value, and filling that in. And then selecting just the parts of it, maybe by cutting out from it. And then modifying that and letting it go darker. What's amazing about duotone coloring is that neither color should be as saturated as the local color. But because it's on its own layer and it's digital, I can always make adjustments to it. If I want the saturation to be a little bit higher, I can. But neither the highlight or the shadow is as saturated as the local color. It also makes it very easy to select your colors, because even though it's now cut edge flat color, it's still quite a bit singular, easy to select individually. So maybe I want those two colors. Now that is what you call duotone. Hard edge color, because it splits the flat into two distinct tones and it keeps a crisp delineation between them. Okay, so let me save this. And then in the next demo, this is basically where we've ended up here. I'm just going to show the soft edge version and then some of the special effects we can do to make this lemon really stand out. And it's up to you whether you decide to do that to your own